The Rivelins had seen suffering before. Generations of war had carved their signature into its soil, burned villages, salted fields, rivers running red with the blood of men who died for kings they had never met. Ravens carried ill news across its skies like black omens. And the small folk had long since learned to read disaster in the thunder of approaching hooves. They had survived the Mad King. They had survived Robert's rebellion. They believed, with the weary resignation of people who have no other choice, that they could survive anything. They had never seen anything like this. The sky above the crossing cracked open without warning. Not with storm clouds or the rolling thunder of a summer squall. It split, like parchment torn by invisible hands. A wound in the fabric of the world that pulsed with sickly green-gold light. Soldiers from both armies froze mid-charge. Lannister crossbowmen lowered their weapons. Stark bannermen gripped their swords and prayed to gods old and new with equal desperation. Horses screamed and reared, throwing riders into the mud. The sound that accompanied the rift was not thunder, it was something older and colder. A resonance that vibrated in the chest and turned blood to ice. And from that wound in the sky, something fell. He descended not with the flailing panic of a man thrown from a height, but with deliberate, terrible stillness, arms at his sides, green cloaks snapping in the arcane wind, his armored form cutting through the air like a blade. He struck the earth, between the two armies with an impact that shook the ground for 50 yards in every direction, mud and blood spraying outward in a perfect circle. When the dust settled, he stood in a crater, knee-deep in churned Rivelin soil, and he looked up. The face that regarded both armies was iron. Literally iron, a mask, cold and expressionless, bearing the faint scars of old damage across its surface. Two green eyes burning with supernatural intelligence. Behind the visor's narrow slits, the armor beneath the green cloak was seamless, ancient in design yet impossibly advanced, humming with an energy that made the hair on every soldier's neck stand at attention. He was not large by the standards of knights and warriors. He did not need to be. He surveyed the battlefield the way a man surveys a map, clinically, with absolute contempt. "Fools," Victor von Doom said, to no one in particular. His voice carried across the entire field without effort, resonant and cold as a dungeon in winter. "All of you, fools." A Lannister sergeant, a brave man, or perhaps merely a stupid one, raised his crossbow and fired. The bolt struck Doom's chest plate and shattered. Doom did not flinch. He did not look at the sergeant. He simply raised one gauntlet hand, and the crossbow exploded into splinters. The sergeant dove into the mud and did not rise again. That was the end of the battle. Both armies retreated, not in rout, in the careful, unanimously agreed upon withdrawal of men who have collectively decided that whatever they were fighting over is no longer worth dying for. They left their dead where they lay. They left their supply wagons. One Stark captain left his horse. They simply turned and walked away from the armored figure, standing in the center of the field, and none of them looked back. Doom watched them go. He turned slowly, studying the landscape, the burned-out farmsteads on the horizon, the corpse-choked river, the ravens circling overhead like patient bureaucrats of death. He had arrived in war zones before. Latveria itself had been a war zone when he inherited it, a broken nation ground beneath the heel of a corrupt ruling class. He had rebuilt it with iron will and absolute authority. He had taken a ruined kingdom and forged it into something that even the great powers of his world treated with wary respect. This place smelled of the same disease, fractured, bleeding, ruled by the unworthy. His time platform had malfunctioned, catastrophically, dimensionally, in a way that even his genius could not immediately diagnose. The arcane signatures were wrong. The dimensional fabric entirely unlike anything in his catalogs. He was not in his world. The physics were similar, but the underlying mystical architecture was profoundly different. Older, rawer, less structured. Magic here did not flow through calculated channels. It pulsed like a heartbeat, wild and tidal, connected to forces he had not yet identified. He needed information. He needed a base of operations. He needed to understand the political landscape before he could reshape it. Doom began walking. He found the nearest village by following the smoke. Cook fires. Not the destructive kind, which suggested people still lived there. It was a modest settlement, half its buildings abandoned, its inhabitants hollow-eyed, with the specific exhaustion of people who have been terrorized by multiple armies and have stopped being surprised by it. They saw him coming down the road and did not run. They had, apparently, run out of the energy required for fear. An old woman sat outside the largest building, an inn, from the faded sign above the door, and watched him approach with the calm of someone who has decided that death, if it comes, will at least mean rest. You'll be wanting something, she said. Information, Doom replied. He pulled a coin from within his cloak, Latvian currency. Useless here, but gold regardless, and set it on the table before her. Tell me everything about the men who claim to rule this land. Their names, their armies, their conflicts, their weaknesses. The old woman looked at the coin, looked at him, picked up the coin. Sit down then, she said. This'll take a while. It took 3 hours. Doom listened without interrupting. 5 claimants to a single throne. A noble family recently destroyed through betrayal. Dragons rumored across the sea. A wall of ice in the far north guarding against something ancient and apparently dismissed by everyone as legend. He cataloged every detail with perfect recall, cross-referencing each piece of information against the next, building in his mind a complete strategic picture of a continent at war with itself. When she finished, he sat in silence for a long moment. These kings, he said finally, they kill each other over one chair. The Iron Throne, and none of them are worthy of it. The old woman laughed, a real laugh, surprised out of her. No, none of them are. Doom rose. He adjusted his cloak. He looked north, then south, then at the horizon where smoke rose from a dozen directions at once. That, he said, will change. If you want to see more characters cross into the worlds of legend and power, hit that subscribe button and drop a character's name in the comments below. The game has just begun. Word traveled fast in Westeros, carried on Raven wings and whispered in the ears of spies and informants who served masters across the continent. It was the lifeblood of power, information, rumor, intelligence gathered and weaponized by those clever enough to use it. Varys, the master of whisperers, had built an entire empire of influence from nothing but whispers and patience. He had survived the Mad King, survived Robert, survived Joffrey. He prided himself on knowing everything that happened within the 7 kingdoms before the people involved had finished happening it. It took him 4 days to learn about the man in the Iron Mask. He sat in his chambers in King's Landing and read the Raven Scroll twice, then a third time, with the careful attention of a man who does not believe what he is reading but cannot find the flaw in it. A figure in metal armor lands in a field between armies, stops a battle without raising a sword, speaks with a voice like a judgment, walks away from 200 armed men and none of them follow. Varys set down the scroll and steepled his fingers beneath his chin. Across the continent, similar scrolls were arriving at similar tables, being read by similar powerful people with very different reactions. Tywin Lannister read his report in the Great Hall of Casterly Rock, standing at his war table with the granite patience that had defined his entire life. He read it once, folded it precisely, and handed it to his maester without expression. Then he walked to the window and looked out at the sea for a long time. Find him, he said finally. My lord. Find the man in the armor. Bring him to me. Offer him gold. A pause. Offer him a great deal of gold. Tywin Lannister had not survived 60 years of political warfare by ignoring anomalies. He had built the most powerful family in Westeros by identifying assets before his enemies did. A man who could stop battles alone, who wore armor that deflected crossbow bolts, who appeared from nowhere, trailing sorcery that was either a catastrophic threat or an extraordinary asset. Tywin dealt in assets. He sent 3 ravens and his best negotiator south toward the Riverlands. Melisandre stood at the prow of a ship off the coast of Dragonstone and felt it. Before the ravens arrived, she felt it in the flames, a new fire in the world, ancient and cold and utterly unlike R'hllor's warmth, yet burning with an intensity that made her own power feel suddenly modest. She had looked into the flames every day for years, reading The Lord of Lights while in the Dance of Fire, and she had never felt another power like this one. She told Stannis that night. A sorcerer, she said. A true one. Not hedge magic or the parlor tricks of the glass candle scholars. Something real. Something I have not encountered before. Stannis Baratheon, who had the emotional range of a Lannister balance sheet, looked at her with his customary expression of constipated conviction. Is he an enemy? He is a force, Melisandre said carefully. The Lord of Light has shown me his fire. Whether it serves us or destroys us depends on choices not yet made. Can he be converted to our cause? Melisandre thought of the cold green light she had seen in the flames. I will try, she said. But she was not certain. For the first time in years, she was genuinely not certain. Doom was not in the Riverlands when the Ravens arrived looking for him. He had moved with systematic efficiency, covering ground that would have taken a mounted knight twice as long on foot, his armor's capabilities compensating easily for the absence of a horse. He had visited 6 villages, 2 abandoned castles, and 1 September whose Septon had given him a surprisingly useful theological briefing on the faith of the 7 before. Fainting from terror, he had cross-referenced everything the old woman told him, against what he observed directly. The gap between reputation and reality, between how these kings saw themselves and what they actually commanded. He stood now on a hill, overlooking the ruins of a minor lordship, burned out by Lannister forces 3 weeks prior. He was studying it not with sympathy, but with the analytical eye of a man, assessing raw material. Stone walls still standing, defensible position, water source nearby, abandoned, useful. Was here that Tywin's negotiator found him, a sharp-faced man named Lyddon, 3rd son of a minor lordship, intelligent enough to have earned Tywin's trust and experienced enough to know when he was genuinely out of his depth. He arrived with 6 guards who positioned themselves with professional discipline, and he approached Doom with the careful confidence of a man walking toward a sleeping lion. My lord, Lyddon began, Lord Tywin Lannister, Lord of Casterly Rock, Shield of Lannisport, and Warden of the West, extends his greetings and his. I know who Tywin Lannister is, Doom said, without turning from his study of the ruins. I know what he wants. The answer is no. Lyddon paused. My lord, you haven't heard the offer. He wants to employ me. Doom turned now, and Lyddon took an involuntary step backward at the sight of the iron face regarding him with absolute patience. He believes that because I demonstrated power, I must be seeking a patron. He assumes that every capable man in this world is ultimately for sale, because in his experience, every capable man in this world has been for sale. It is, I will grant him, a reasonable assumption based on available evidence. A pause. I am not available evidence. Lyddon steadied himself. He was, to his credit, a professional. Lord Tywin anticipated resistance. He asked me to convey that he is not seeking a servant, but a partner. An alliance between. Tywin Lannister does not form alliances, Doom said. He forms arrangements, in which the other party believes. They are equal until the moment it becomes inconvenient for them to believe that. I have read men like him my entire life. They are useful. They are dangerous. And they are not, under any interpretation of the word, my equals. The guards shifted. Hands moved toward sword hilts. Doom looked at them with something that might, on another face, have been amusement. Draw those swords, he said quietly, and I will send Tywin Lannister back his men in pieces too small to bury with dignity. Tell him that. Tell him also that I am aware of his position, his resources, and his strategic situation. Tell him that if he is patient and intelligent, which his reputation suggests he is, he will understand that the correct response to my presence in this continent is not recruitment. It is observation. He turned back to the ruins. Tell him to watch. He will learn something. Lyddon retreated with the careful speed of a man preserving his dignity while fleeing. The guards followed without looking back. 3 days later, Melisandre arrived alone, robed in red, her ruby choker catching what little light the gray Riverland sky provided. She walked up the hill to where Doom had established a makeshift camp, fire burning without wood, sustained entirely by sorcery. Arcane diagrams scratched into the earth around the perimeter, and she stopped at the edge of his wards and felt them push back against her. Those won't stop me, she said. They are not designed to stop you. Doom replied, seated across the fire, studying a map he had hand-drawn. From memory of everything the ravens and small folk had told him. They are designed to tell me what you are. I know now. A fire priestess. Genuine power, derivative source. Your magic flows from an external deity, real, based on the energy signature, but limited by worship and doctrine. He looked up. Latveria has had state religions before. I dissolved them. Power derived from devotion too. Something other than oneself is power. With a leash attached, Melisandre sat across the fire from him. She had not been invited to sit. She did it anyway, with the composure of a woman who believed herself guided by a god, which provided a particular kind of courage. You are not from this world. Correct. R'hllra's flames showed me your arrival before it happened. The Lord of Light sees all fires. In all places. She studied him with those unsettling eyes. You burn very brightly, Victor Von Doom. A pause. The fire crackled between them. Do not use that name casually, Doom said. His voice did not rise. But something in the air changed, a pressure, a charge. The feeling of standing too close to a lightning strike. You have done your research. I respect diligence. But familiarity is a privilege I grant. It has not been granted to you. Melisandre absorbed this without flinching. Stannis Baratheon is the true king of this realm. He has the best claim. He has a legitimate claim in a system I did not choose and do not recognize. Doom said, Go back to your king, priestess. Tell him what you found here. Tell him to stay out of my way. He looked back at his map. I will not tell him twice. Melisandre left as the sun set, and Doom watched the fire she walked away from, thinking about dragons across the narrow sea, about a wall of ice in the north, about 5 kings bleeding a continent dry over a chair made of melted swords. He had seen the Iron Throne described in his intelligence, a seat forged from the blades of conquered enemies, uncomfortable by design, ugly by necessity, symbolic of a philosophy of power through domination and fear. He understood the philosophy entirely. He simply intended to improve upon it. The Red Wedding happened on a Tuesday. Doom knew it was coming. He had known for 6 days, long enough to have stopped it 3 different ways, each calculated to the minute. He could have warned Robb Stark directly. He could have collapsed the twins' walls before the feast began. He could have sent a raven to the young wolf's mother, whose intelligence he had assessed as considerably sharper than her son's, and trusted her to act on the warning with appropriate urgency. He did none of these things. He watched instead, from a distance of 4 miles, through a scrying construct he had assembled from materials purchased in a river, town's market, copper wire, a bowl of still water, 3 components from his own armors, sensor array, and he observed every minute of the massacre with the cold attention of a surgeon studying a disease he has already decided to cure. He needed to understand Westeros at its worst before he could rebuild it at its best. What he saw disgusted him, not with the violence. Doom had witnessed and authored violence on a scale that would have made Walder Frey weep with inadequacy. What disgusted him was the smallness of it, the pettiness. A man of Walder Frey's age, with Walder Frey's resources, and the best he could conceive, was a dinner party ambush, motivated by wounded pride over a broken marriage contract. Tywin Lannister, orchestrating from a distance, spending the lives of the Stark bannermen, like copper coins to eliminate a military rival he could have defeated in open battle within a year regardless. This was how Westeros solved its problems. Not with strategy, with betrayal dressed up as strategy. Robb Stark died with a sword through his heart and his crown on the floor, and Doom watched the light leave his eyes, through the scrying water, and felt something he rarely permitted himself, a specific, cold anger. Not grief, not sentiment. The anger of a craftsman watching someone destroy a useful tool out of spite. The young wolf had been a genuine commander, undefeated in open battle. His men loved him. His enemies feared him. Wasted, thrown away by small men playing small games. Doom extinguished the scrying, construct, and sat in silence for exactly 4 minutes. Then he stood, adjusted his cloak, and walked toward the twins. He arrived at dawn, when the bodies were still being thrown into the river. The Frey guards on the outer gate saw him coming across the bridge approach and scrambled for their weapons with the panicked energy of men who had been awake all night doing something they knew was monstrous and were consequently terrified of consequences. There were 14 of them. They raised crossbows, spears, swords. Doom raised one hand. Every weapon in their grip bent, slowly, deliberately. like green wood in heat, curling back on itself until the metal was useless. The guards stared at their ruined weapons. Then they looked at the figure walking calmly through their gate, and they stepped aside with the unanimous instinct of men choosing survival over duty. He found Robb Stark's body in the yard where they had left it. Gray. Wynn's dire wolf head sewn grotesquely onto the shoulders in a final act of mockery. He stood over it for a long moment. Then he crouched and examined the wounds with clinical precision. Crossbow bolts, sword thrusts, the specific pattern of a planned ambush. Multiple assailants. Coordinated. The killing blow through the heart had been recent enough that the blood had not fully dried. He placed one gauntlet hand on the young wolf's chest. What Doom did next drew on the oldest and darkest layer of his sorceress. Knowledge. He had taken from Morgana Le Fay herself, from Tibetan monks who had spent lifetimes mapping the border between living and dead, from his own mother's soul in Mephisto's realm, from every dark corner of mystical learning he had accumulated across a lifetime of ruthless scholarship. Death reversal was not a trick. It was not a spell with a simple incantation. It was a negotiation with forces that did not appreciate being overruled. The magic here was different, rawer, older, less structured than anything in his world. But its fundamental nature was the same. Life force was life force. The border between living and dead followed the same logic across dimensions. He pushed. The process took 11 minutes. During those 11 minutes, 4 Fry guards worked up the collective courage to approach him from behind with swords. Without looking up or interrupting his work, Doom encased all 4 in a crackling field of electromagnetic force that held them suspended 3 feet off the ground, unable to move or speak, but entirely unharmed. They hung there like portraits on an invisible wall, watching with enormous eyes. On the 12th minute, Robb Stark gasped. It was not a gentle awakening. It was the violent, desperate inhalation of a man dragged back from a very long distance. A sound like a drowning man breaking the surface. His eyes opened, gray, stark gray, wide with the specific terror of someone who remembers dying, and he stared up at the iron mask above him with an expression that moved rapidly through shock, confusion, and landed somewhere near furious incomprehension. "You're dead," Doom said, before Stark could speak. "Or you were. I have corrected this. You will have questions. Save them." Stark sat up with visible effort, looked at his own hands, looked at the yard around him, the bodies, the blood, the suspended guards floating inexplicably nearby, and arrived, with impressive speed, at a coherent response. "Where is my mother?" The question landed like a stone in still water. Doom had seen Caitlin Tully's body in the scrying construct. Her throat had been cut. He had not attempted to retrieve it. "Gone," he said. Something shifted in Stark's face, a grief so profound and sudden that it moved even through Doom's considerable emotional armor. The young wolf closed his eyes. His hands closed into fists. He sat in the blood of his bannermen in the yard of his enemies, and he breathed, slowly and deliberately, with the controlled discipline of a man refusing to break in front of a stranger. Doom watched this with something approaching respect. Grief processed privately and converted to resolve. That was a king's quality. He had seen far lesser men shatter under far less. "Why?" Stark said finally, his voice steady. "Did you bring me back?" "Because you are useful," Doom said. "And because what was done to you was an insult to the concept of honorable warfare that I find intolerable." Stark opened his eyes. He looked at the iron mask with an expression that was measuring, assessing, older than his years. "You didn't do it out of mercy." "No. What do you want from me?" Doom stood, his cloak settling around him. He looked at the twins, at the banners of House Fry hanging above the gates, at the bodies being tossed into the river like garbage, at the whole wretched monument to small men's small ambitions. "I want you to ride north," Doom said. "I want you to let your enemies believe you dead for exactly as long as it takes me to arrange several things. I want you to go to your bannermen who escaped, and some did escape. I have confirmed this, and I want you to rebuild quietly and wait for my word. And then," Doom looked at him, "and then Westeros changes. Your family's name will be restored. The men who did this will answer for it. But the manner of that answering will be mine to decide, not yours." He paused. "You were a fine battlefield commander, Stark. You were a poor political strategist. Those failures cost you everything. If you work with me, I will provide the political strategy. You will provide the legitimacy of a name the North already follows." Stark was quiet for a long moment. The gray light of dawn moved across the yard. Ravens circled. "You're not offering me my kingdom back," Stark said slowly. "You're offering me a role in yours." "I am offering you survival and purpose," Doom said. "Which is more than you had 4 hours ago." Another silence. Stark looked at his hands again, the hands of a dead man, alive again through the will of an armored stranger from beyond the stars. He looked at the Fry banners. He looked north, toward home, toward a family reduced to ghosts and scattered survivors. "What are you?" he asked. "The man who will rule this continent," Doom said simply. "The only question remaining is how many people have to die before the rest of Westeros agrees." He released the 4 suspended guards. They dropped to the ground, scrambled upright, and ran. Doom watched them go. "They will tell Walder Frey what happened here," Stark observed. "Yes," Doom agreed. "That is the point." He wanted Westeros afraid. Fear, applied correctly and consistently, was the most efficient political tool ever devised. Not the fear of random brutality that produced only chaos and resistance. The fear of inevitable, unstoppable, perfectly controlled consequence. The fear of a power that could not be bribed, could not be betrayed, could not be reasoned out of its intentions. He wanted every king in Westeros to wake up in the night and wonder if the man in the iron mask was coming for them. He wanted them to already know the answer. Harrenhal had been cursed for 300 years. Every lord who had ever held it had died badly, some quickly, some slowly, all inevitably, as though the castle itself extracted payment for the hubris of occupying it. It had been built by a king who wanted to prove something to the world, burned by a dragon before the mortar was fully dry, and had stood ever since as the largest and most useless fortress in Westeros, a monument to the gap between ambition and wisdom. Its towers were melted at the tops like candles left too close to a hearth. Its walls were thick enough to withstand any conventional siege. Its halls were vast and cold and haunted by the specific misery of every broken house that had called it home. Doom found it perfect. He took it on a gray morning in early autumn, walking through the main gate alone while 300 Lannister garrison soldiers watched from the walls. He had sent no ravens. He had brought no army. He had simply appeared at the gate at dawn and knocked, which was either the most arrogant thing any human being had ever done at Harrenhal's gates or the most confident. And the distinction, the garrison commander decided after 40 seconds of paralyzed deliberation, was academic. The commander, a competent man named Ser Harys Swyft, distantly related to the Lannisters and appointed to the garrison as much for his family connection as his military skill, came to the gate personally. He looked at the armored figure. He looked at his 300 soldiers. He did the mathematics of what he had heard from Frey messengers, from Lannister scouts, from the terrified reports, filtering back from the Riverlands about a metal-faced sorcerer who bent steel with his hands and raised the dead. "My lord," he said carefully, "Harrenhal is held in the name of House Lannister." It was, Doom said. "Open the gate." Ser Harys opened the gate. The garrison was not harmed. Doom had no interest in gratuitous violence against soldiers following orders. It was wasteful, and waste was a sin he did not tolerate in himself or others. He assembled them in the yard, all 300, and addressed them with the directness of a man who has never in his life felt the need to soften a truth. "You have 2 choices," he told them. "Leave and return to whatever lords you serve, carrying the message that Harrenhal now belongs to me, or stay under my authority, under my rules, paid regularly and treated according to the standard your previous service earned you." He paused. "I will not ask for oaths of loyalty. Oaths in this country appear to be worth considerably less than the breath used to speak them. I ask only for professional conduct and the intelligence to recognize which way the wind is blowing." 212 soldiers stayed. Within a fortnight, Harrenhal was transformed. Not physically. Doom had no interest in cosmetic renovation, but functionally. The castle that had been a Lannister garrison became something entirely new. A seat of independent power, outside the jurisdiction of any of the 5 kings. flying no banner but a plain green field with a single iron mask at its center, which Doom had designed himself on his third morning in residence and had a frightened seamstress produce by evening. Word spread faster than he intended, which meant it spread at exactly the speed he intended. The first envoy arrived from King's Landing within 8 days, a smooth-faced man from Varys' network who introduced himself with 3 different names in the space of one conversation, which Doom found either impressive or exhausting depending on his mood. He brought an invitation from the small council to discuss matters of mutual interest. Tell the spider, Doom said, using Varys' nickname with the deliberate familiarity of someone who had done thorough research, that when I wish to speak with him, I will contact him. Tell him also that I am aware of his little birds in the riverlands. 3 of them have been watching this castle for 6 days. They are unharmed and have been given a warm meal and a cot. They may leave whenever they choose. The envoy left pale and quiet. The second envoy came from the north, one of Robb Stark's surviving commanders, a grizzled man named Galbart Glover, who had escaped the Red Wedding by luck and timing and had spent 3 weeks hiding in the wilderness eating berries and self-recrimination. He brought news that shook even Doom's composure slightly. Robb Stark had arrived in the north alive, his survival spreading through the remaining loyal houses like fire through dry grass. The north remembered. The north was, quietly and carefully, beginning to move again. Doom had planned for this. He had not planned for how quickly it would happen. Tell your lord, Doom said to Glover, that the time is not yet right. Tell him to continue building. Tell him the patience of a month will be worth more than the haste of a week. Glover studied him with the suspicious eyes of a man who has learned the hard way that powerful strangers bearing gifts are usually extracting something in return. The young wolf wants to know what you expect from the north in return for his life. Nothing yet, Doom said. That is what makes me different from every other powerful person who has ever made him an offer. Glover left uncertain, but carrying the message. The third envoy did not come from a king. She arrived on Dragonback. Doom was standing on Harrenhal's highest remaining tower, the one whose top had been melted into a shape that resembled, at certain angles, a fist when the dragon appeared on the horizon. He had been expecting this. He had sent a raven to Essos 3 weeks prior, a message composed with careful precision and sealed with a wax impression of his iron mask, addressed to Daenerys Targaryen, first of her name, and containing exactly 47 words. The dragon was Drogon. He knew this from descriptions. The largest of the 3, black as void with red eyes like burning coals. It was magnificent. Doom assessed it with genuine appreciation for a moment before returning to strategic analysis. The dragon was approximately the most powerful conventional weapon on the continent. Its rider was the most legitimate claimant to the throne by blood, and the most dangerous political actor currently operating, which made her either his most valuable potential partner or his most dangerous potential obstacle. She landed in the yard below in an eruption of wing beats that scattered every soldier within 50 yards. Doom descended from the tower at his own pace, unhurried, and arrived in the yard to find Daenerys Targaryen standing before her dragon with the composed authority of a woman who has learned that the best way to project power is to appear entirely unsurprised by everything. She was smaller than he had expected. Most genuinely dangerous people were. She looked at him across the yard, the silver hair, the violet eyes, the expression of absolute regal certainty, and he looked back at the iron mask, the green cloak, the humming armor. 2 powers regarding each other across 20 feet of Harrenhal's ancient stones. You sent me a very short letter, she said. I said everything necessary, Doom replied. The letter had read, your dragons are not the most dangerous thing in Westeros. I am. Come to Harrenhal, and we will discuss whether we are allies or obstacles. Doom. That's either confidence or madness, Daenerys said. In my experience, Doom said, the difference is determined by outcome. She studied him for a long moment. Drogon shifted behind her, a low rumble building. In his chest, the sound of a creature assessing whether something constitutes a threat. Doom looked at the dragon without flinching, which seemed to surprise both dragon and rider. Most men are afraid of him, Daenerys said. I have faced creatures that make your dragon look like a household pet, Doom said. This was not a boast. It was simply true, and she appeared to recognize the difference. I am not here to diminish what you have built or what you represent. The Targaryen claim to this throne is legitimate. Your personal capability is exceptional. Your dragons are extraordinary weapons. He paused. You also have no political infrastructure in Westeros, no noble alliances, no understanding of the specific feudal dynamics of the continent you intend to rule, and an advisor's council that has consistently underestimated the complexity of Westerosi politics. Daenerys's expression tightened slightly. And you do? I have spent 2 months learning this continent with a thoroughness that your advisors have not managed in years, Doom said. I know where every lord's loyalty truly lies beneath the loyalty they perform. I know which houses can be flipped, which must be destroyed, and which will follow strength. The moment strength presents itself, clearly enough. He gestured toward the castle around them. I have a base of operations, a growing garrison, and the active fear of every major power in Westeros, which is the most valuable political currency available. What do you want? Daenerys asked. The same question Stark had asked with entirely different weight. The same thing I always want, Doom said. Order, stability, a continent that functions instead of bleeds. He tilted his head slightly. You want the Iron Throne. I want Westeros governed competently. These goals are not incompatible, provided we are honest about the terms. You'd serve me? She said it with genuine curiosity rather than arrogance. No, Doom said flatly. I would govern beside you, as an equal authority over specific domains, with clearly defined jurisdiction and mutual non-interference. I have ruled a nation. I am not interested in a subordinate role. I am interested in a functional outcome. Drogon rumbled again. Daenerys was quiet for a long time, those violet eyes working through calculations that Doom could partially read and found impressively sophisticated. She was smarter than her enemies gave her credit for. She was also, he noted, accustomed to being the most powerful person in any given situation, and the specific discomfort of encountering something she could not immediately categorize was visible in the set of her shoulders. I need to think, she said finally. Of course, Doom said. You are welcome at Harrenhal for as long as deliberation requires. Your dragon will be accommodated in the outer yard. There is sufficient space and the walls are fireproof, as Aegon the Conqueror's dragon demonstrated thoroughly 3 centuries ago. Something moved across her face that was almost, not quite, but almost, a smile. She stayed for 3 days. They talked for 6 hours each day, not negotiating exactly, but mapping the space between their respective positions, with the careful precision of 2 people who respect each other enough to be honest about their incompatibilities. On the 4th morning, she mounted Drogon and flew east, back toward her fleet. She had not agreed to his terms. She had not rejected them either. Doom watched her go from the melted tower and turned his attention south, toward King's Landing, where Tywin Lannister had spent the past month growing increasingly agitated by reports from the Riverlands. He could feel the old lions. Frustration from 200 miles away, a man who prided himself on controlling every variable in every situation. He had given Tywin enough time to observe. Now it was time to give him something to fear. The ravens arrived at Harrenhal on a cold morning, 7 of them simultaneously, from 7 different sources, all carrying variations of the same message. They were coming. Tywin Lannister had finally stopped observing. The intelligence had been building for 2 weeks, Doom's network of informants, assembled with the methodical patience of a man who understood that information was the foundation of all real power, had tracked the movements with precision. Tywin had spent a month doing exactly what Doom told him to do, which was watch, and watching had taught him exactly what Doom intended it to teach him, that the man in Harrenhal was not going away, was not manageable through gold or negotiation, and was accumulating influence at a rate that made delay increasingly costly. Tywin Lannister had not built his legacy by allowing threats to mature unopposed. He was sending the Mountain Gregor Clegane, 8 feet of weaponized brutality, the most feared individual combatant in Westeros, a man whose reputation for violence had served as Tywin's bluntest instrument for 4 decades. He was coming with 300 cavalry and the specific mandate of a man sent not to negotiate, but to demonstrate that Lannister power had a physical, unstoppable expression that no amount of sorcery could ultimately resist. Simultaneously, Stannis Baratheon had finally moved. Melisandre's counsel and his own rigid strategic logic had converged on the same conclusion. The power at Harrenhal represented either the greatest threat or the greatest opportunity in the war. And Stannis was not a man who left either unaddressed. He was marching from the east with 4,000 men and the absolute conviction of the righteous. And from the north, fragmented but moving with the desperate urgency of men with nothing left to lose. The remaining Stark loyalists were converging, not at Doom's invitation, but drawn by the gravitational pull of the only stable power center in the Riverlands, and by word from their resurrected king that Harrenhal was where the war would turn. 3 forces, 3 different intentions, 1 castle. Doom had known this was coming for 11 days. He had spent those 11 days preparing with the thoroughness of a man who has never in his life relied on improvisation when preparation was available. Harrenhal's walls had been reinforced not with additional stone, but with something the Westerosi had no framework to understand, a network of electromagnetic conductors embedded in the existing stonework, thin copper filaments laid into the mortar by soldiers who followed instructions without understanding them, creating a castle-wide defensive grid that could be activated at will. The yard had been reorganized. Supplies had been stockpiled. His garrison, now numbering 412, had been drilled to a standard that would have impressed a Lannister commander. He had also sent a raven to Robb Stark the night before. 3 words. Now, come home. The Mountain arrived first. At midday, thundering across the Riverlands flatlands with his cavalry column trailing behind him, like a steel river. Gregor Clegane rode at the front on a horse that was visibly unhappy about the arrangement, a destrier bred for war, straining under a rider who weighed as much as 2 normal men in full armor. The Mountain's reputation preceded him like a physical force. Soldiers who had never met him moved aside from his path on instinct, the way animals clear the road for something larger than themselves. He stopped 200 yards from Harrenhal's gate and looked at the green banner with the iron mask. Then he looked at the figures standing on the battlements above the gate, arms crossed, absolutely motionless, watching him with the patient attention of a man waiting for something tedious to conclude. "Open the gate," Clegane bellowed, his voice carrying the flat authority of a man who has never had to ask twice for anything. "In the name of House Lannister, this castle is commanded to." Doom raised one hand. Every horse in the column stopped. Not slowed, stopped. Completely, simultaneously, as though the concept of forward momentum had been surgically removed from their understanding. 300 cavalry horses stood perfectly still, locked in place by a magnetic field that had no interest in their opinions on the matter. The riders lurched forward, in their saddles with the collective, undignified stumble of men whose horses have just become statues. Clegane's destrier stopped like the rest. The Mountain looked down at his immobile horse, then back up at the battlements. Doom descended from the walls and walked through the gate alone. He crossed the 200 yards of open ground between himself and the Mountain at an unhurried pace, his cloak moving in the autumn wind, and stopped 10 feet from Clegane's frozen horse. He looked up at the Mountain. The Mountain looked down at him. Gregor Clegane was, Doom acknowledged privately, genuinely enormous. The skull-decorated helmet, the massive blade across his back, the sheer physical scale of the man. In any conventional military context, he was an overwhelming force. He had terrorized a continent for decades through the simple, effective mechanism of being something that ordinary violence could not stop. Doom was not ordinary violence. "Dismount," Doom said. The Mountain dismounted, not because he chose to, but because the magnetic field that held his horse in place extended to the armor he wore, and Doom adjusted it precisely enough to move Clegane off the saddle and set him on the ground with the careful deliberateness of a man placing a piece on a chessboard. The Mountain found himself standing on the road, his sword hand locked at his side, his enormous frame held in a grip he couldn't see or fight or understand. He strained against it. Doom watched the effort with clinical interest. The man was extraordinarily strong, the muscles in his neck and shoulders working with visible violence. against the invisible restraint. Most men stopped trying after 3 seconds. Clegane kept straining for nearly 30. Doom waited him out. "I am going to release you," Doom said, when the mountain finally stilled. "And you are going to return to Tywin Lannister with a message. You will not attack me, not because you are incapable of trying, but because you are going to make a rational decision about what happens to men who try." He tilted his head. "You have survived this long by being the most dangerous thing in any given situation. I am telling you, clearly and without malice, that you are not the most dangerous thing in this situation. Carry that information back to your lord. It is more valuable than your death." He released the field. Clegane stood free, sword hand no longer locked, every option available to him. He looked at Doom for a long 5 seconds, the calculation visible even behind the skull helmet, the specific internal arithmetic of a man who has built his entire identity on being unstoppable, confronting genuine evidence to the contrary. He turned, remounted his horse, and rode back the way he came. His cavalry followed without a word. Doom watched them go and turned back to the castle as Stannis Baratheon's vanguard appeared on the eastern horizon. Stannis arrived with the grim efficiency that defined everything about him: formations precise, supply lines organized, his personal banner snapping in the wind with the rigid rectitude of its owner. He rode at the front himself, which Doom noted with approval. Whatever Stannis Baratheon's limitations, physical cowardice was not among them. Melisandre rode at his right hand, her red robes impractical for a military march and completely representative of her priorities. She met Doom's gaze across the field with an expression that combined wariness, fascination, and the specific frustration of a woman who has spent a month trying to fit an anomaly into her theology and hasn't succeeded. Stannis halted his army at 300 yards and rode forward. Alone, or nearly alone, Melisandre staying at his shoulder like a red shadow. "Lord Doom," Stannis said. He used the title without apparent irony, which Doom found either respectful or pragmatic. Probably both. "I have come to discuss terms." "You have come," Doom said, "because you calculated that direct assault would cost you between 800 and 1,200 men, which represents between 20 and 30% of your current force, and that a force reduced by 30% cannot subsequently take King's Landing against the Lannister garrison even with Melisandre's assistance. You have come because the mathematics of your situation require an alliance you would rather not need." Stannis stared at him. "You've had spies in my camp." "I have had arithmetic," Doom said. "It requires fewer ravens." He looked at the king, the jaw like a castle wall, the eyes that held the specific righteous fury of a man who has spent his entire life being correct and being denied credit for it. There was something almost sympathetic in it. Almost. "You are, of the 5 kings currently claiming this throne, the only one whose primary motivation is genuine conviction rather than ambition or survival. That is worth something." "Then support my claim," Stannis said. "No," Doom said. The word landed like a stone. Melisandre's hand moved toward her ruby choker. Stannis's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes shifted from calculation to the cold precipice of decision. "Then we are enemies," Stannis said. "We are neither allies nor enemies," Doom said. "We are 2 powers who occupy the same continent and must arrive at an accommodation. I am not taking your throne, Stannis. I have no interest in sitting on a chair made of swords. I intend to govern the actual mechanisms of this realm, its laws, its military structure, its administration, while a Westerosi monarch occupies the symbolic seat that your people require for psychological continuity." He paused. "The question is whether that monarch is you or someone else." Stannis was quiet for a long time. The wind moved across the field between them. "You would put me on the throne," he said slowly, "and rule through me." "I would put a capable administrator on the throne," Doom said, "and govern beside them with defined authority and transparent jurisdiction. Latveria, my nation, functions precisely because its ruler has absolute clarity of purpose and zero tolerance for corruption or incompetence. Westeros has neither. I intend to provide both." He looked at Stannis directly. "You are rigid. You are humorless. You are incapable of political flexibility. And you make enemies of potential allies through sheer interpersonal abrasiveness. He paused. You are also incorruptible, genuinely competent at administration, and the most honest man currently claiming this throne. These qualities matter more than the others. It was, by Doom's standards, practically a speech of admiration. Stannis looked at Melisandre. She was watching Doom with an expression of complex reassessment, the theology visibly restructuring itself behind her eyes to accommodate a power that didn't fit any of her existing categories. What of my queen? Stannis asked. My daughter. Untouched, Doom said. Honored. Your family's position is secured as part of any arrangement. The negotiation that followed lasted 4 hours, conducted in Harrenhal's great hall over a table. Doom had ordered cleaned of the accumulated grime of 3 centuries of miserable lordship. Terms were set, argued over, refined, and agreed upon with the specific exhausted relief of 2 parties who both wanted the same functional outcome and differed only on the decorative questions around it. When Stannis rode back to his army at dusk, he was not a happy man. He was, however, a man with a deal. Robb Stark arrived at midnight with 400 northern riders, gray-cloaked and silent as snow, and found Harrenhal's gates open and a single torch burning at the entrance. He rode through to find Doom waiting in the yard, alone, as if he had known the exact minute of their arrival. The North remembers, Stark said, by way of greeting. The North will be left to govern itself, Doom replied. Under Stark authority. Permanently. He let that land. I have no interest in the North's internal governance. I want its military capacity available, when needed, and its political neutrality maintained. In exchange, the Stark name is restored. The Red Wedding is answered for, and the men responsible face consequences commensurate with their actions. Stark looked at him for a long moment. He had filled out since. Harrenhal, the ghost of the dead king replaced by something harder and quieter. A man who had experienced death and returned from it, with the specific clarity of someone who has stopped being afraid of it. Walder Frey, Stark said. Will answer, Doom said. On my schedule. Through my justice. Not through your revenge. He held Stark's gaze. Revenge is a luxury that costs more than it returns. I will not permit it to compromise the larger objective. Stark's jaw tightened. Then, slowly he nodded. 3 powers under one roof. Not an alliance. Alliances implied equality and shared purpose. And this was neither. It was an architecture of mutual interest, carefully designed, with Doom as its foundation. Outside the walls, Westeros was still bleeding. The Lannisters were regrouping. Daenerys's fleet was moving. The Night's Watch was sending, increasingly desperate, ravens about something in the north that everyone was still choosing to ignore. But in Harrenhal, for the first time in 300 years, the torches burned all night without anyone dying. Westeros did not fall to Dr. Doom in a single battle. It fell the way all great powers fall, gradually, then completely, through the accumulated weight of superior will applied with infinite patience. Walder Frey answered for the Red Wedding within the month. Doom did not burn the twins. He did not need to. He simply arrived, alone, walked through every gate unopposed, and placed Walder Frey before a court, assembled from every house that had lost blood at that feast. The sentence was delivered not by northern rage, but by documented law, written by Doom himself in the first draft of what would eventually become the realm's new legal code. The lesson traveled faster than any raven. There was a new kind of justice in Westeros now, and it did not distinguish between the powerful and the powerless. Tywin Lannister died as he always would have, not in battle, not by Doom's hand, but by the accumulated consequences of a lifetime of ruthlessness catching up with him in a private moment. Doom inherited his legacy without needing to fight for it. Daenerys returned with her dragons and found a Westeros already fundamentally restructured. Their negotiation, resumed over 3 weeks of careful conversation, produced the arrangement Doom had always intended: a Targaryen monarch on the Iron Throne, symbolic and genuinely powerful, with Doom as an autonomous governing authority over law, military reform, and administrative structure. The Iron Throne itself he melted down and reforged. A chair made of conquered swords was a philosophy he refused to endorse. The new seat was plain iron, functional, dignified. Westeros had never had either before. In the far north, beyond the wall, something ancient stirred in the darkness and felt, for the first time in 10,000 years, something that gave it pause, something that felt like it too.